The Senzo Meyiwa murder trial is back in the High Court in Pretoria this morning after a lengthy postponement. The NPA is expected to hand over a new directive to the court on the jurisdiction of the controversial second docket. That docket implicates those who were in the room on the night the former Bafana star was murdered back in 2014. The NPA also says the decision on the docket will be taken post the current trial. Our reporter Linda Mnisi joins us now live ahead of today's appearance. Linda, lots of questions as the case goes back to court this morning. For one, what's the involvement of Advocate Malisela Teffo?
Well, as you would know, Michelle, he did, of course, withdraw his representation for accused number 1 to 4 on the 12th of July. We've seen him write letters saying that he's back and has been given, the mandate by the families of the accused, but that turned out not to be true. Recently, there was, of course, an issue where he said that they would be meeting with the families. In fact, it's about a week ago, if I'm not mistaken, where he had said that they would be meeting with the family, where a new directive would be given for him to return to this particular case. But we saw families coming out, making statements, in particular the sister of accused number 4, saying that what Teffo has said about a meeting was in fact not true. She had communicated with a number of family members and there isn't such a meeting that took place, and a new directive was not given, or a new mandate was not given to him for him to come back on this particular trial. Where he is in terms of this overall case is on a watching brief for docket 375. You'll remember that docket is closely being watched by those implicated in this case, not only accused number 1 to 5, but also the Senzo Meyiwa family. The Meyiwa family, who have said that they believe, a faction in fact of that family, who says they believe that the real evidence in that docket is the one that should be before this particular court. So we're not expecting Advocate Malisela Teffo to be in court. I had an opportunity to speak to him just last week after that letter by the NPA, and he said he's watching closely what will unfold today in this court, given that he's on watching brief for docket 375, and that whatever the new directive is going to affect him, so he'll be watching closely these proceedings. He did confirm to me that he will not be in court today.
There have been calls, Linda, for a long time since the sort of revelation around this second docket for the people who were in the room to be charged from various quarters, those calls coming. Interesting to see what happens in court today.
Indeed, given the fact that there's now a new directive, Michelle, by the National Director of Public Prosecutions, you would know that, a DPP only has jurisdiction over matters that happened in their jurisdiction. The Senzo Meyiwa case happened in the East Rand, which means it would fall under the South Gauteng division, and not necessarily the North Gauteng division, but we've seen the National Director of Public Prosecutions previously transferring the case that is currently before this court in North Gauteng to this particular jurisdiction, when in fact it was initially meant to sit in the South Gauteng division. We're seeing now this new directive that they issued last week, that that docket 375 will also be transferred to this jurisdiction, and they'll be closely monitoring the proceedings and ultimately make a decision on what should happen, particularly based on the credibility of the witnesses who were inside the house at the time of the shooting. And there's been many questions, Michelle, about why now the NPA has decided to move to make a decision post this current trial, given the fact that investigations had been made a long time ago. This is a docket that was opened in 2019 by police officers who felt frustrated by the lack of progression in the 636 docket. So if the investigations were concluded, why are they then waiting for post the trial to make a decision on whether or not the people who were in the house are credible or not? We're already sitting with two versions of what happened based on docket 636 and docket 375. The affidavits that have been deposed particularly also were told by those who were in the house. So what assurance then does the NPA need post those affidavits. What are their findings saying based on what the investigations have said? So these are the questions that are coming up as, of course, they're expected to hand over this new directive over in court. That letter, of course, directed to Advocate Malisela Teffo as well as instructing attorney Titi Tobani.
And Linda, before we let you go, I mean, a lot of time has lapsed since the murder of Senzo Meyiwa. We're coming up for a decade in just under 2 years' time. This happening in 2014. How does that impact, if indeed we do go ahead with the second docket, let's say, how does that impact investigations?
Yeah, because the NPA is also not letting us into their strategy in terms of what exactly the aim is here. They say that they've taken a prosecutorial strategy which would then, depend on the credibility findings of this court. And I spoke to one analyst yesterday, Michelle, who was saying that it would seem that the NPA is really not sure about what exactly it is doing in this particular instance, because it would have had the version of the people who were in the house at the time. And if it feels that they were not being credible, then they should be joining the people who are in the docket and possibly charge them for perjury, because they are now acting in common purpose. This analyst, saying that it really does not make sense why the NPA would want to wait till the end of this trial to make a decision on whether or not to prosecute the people who were in the house or not. So it really does have an impact, because if you look at what the NPA is also saying in terms of the credibility findings, 8 years later, are they saying that they're still not sure about whether or not what Kelly Khumalo and the people who are in the house are telling is the truth or not? What exactly are they saying about the statements that have been deposed and the evidence that has been collected 8 years down the line? Why? It goes back to also, Michelle, the question around why 8 years later we're sitting with two dockets. We are at a point where there's been a lengthy postponement, because also they did not disclose this docket to Advocate Mshololo, who's representing accused number 5. She told this court that the fact that she knew of the existence of the second docket does not mean it was given to her. These are issues that are dealt with at pre-trial stage, discovery. And it seems the second docket was not discovered to the defense in the form of Advocate Mshololo representing accused number 5. So there are a number of issues that are at play here which really would impact on whether or not the Meyiwa family will finally get the answers that they need.
Absolutely. Linda Mnisi, thanks very much indeed. Live to us there from the High Court sitting in Pretoria.